Neil Battaglia, saxstation.com. I want to talk for a minute about vintage saxophones. And I went to NAMM a few weeks ago. I tried a bunch of new saxophones like Cannonball, P. Mariette, Max Sax, Selmer, Yamaha, Antigua. There's a bunch of brands there, Rampone. But what I'm playing is actually not new at all. It's from 1920. It's a very old saxophone. And the brand of it is Buescher. It doesn't actually say Buescher on the bell. It says Carl Fischer. But what happened is some of these saxophone companies used to make, and instrument companies used to make instruments, and other companies would put their own logos on the saxophones. And they're called stencils. So this is a stencil horn, but it was made by Buescher. So it is a Buescher horn. It basically just has a different label on it. Sometimes other products you see have the same process done. But basically, yeah, this is a Buescher. It's from 1920. And it's seen a little bit of wear and tear for the years, but it's in pretty good shape. Like, obviously, not all these pads are original. It's had to have some work done. There's some stuff up here on the neck that had some repair done. But overall, I really just like the sound of the saxophone. It's a little bit harder to play than some of the more modern horns. Like with the table keys over here, you can't transition as easily. There actually is no front F. Like, this is the key here. There is nothing right here. And that makes it a little bit harder to play certain notes. Like when I play a high G, I have to use an alternate fingering that works for this saxophone. I can't use the front F because there is no front F. And there's definitely no F sharp key. There's no front F, there's no F sharp key, high F sharp key. There's actually this other little key, which if you can see it right there, this thing is like an alternate trill key. And they stopped making that on saxophones. If you have certain older saxophones, you'll see that. But basically, it's kind of useful if you want to trill for a certain note, but it ended up being decided that that wasn't really a worthwhile feature to keep on the saxophones. And this one that I have here, there's a little cork right there, so it's like holding it together. It's easier to play it with just not worrying about that key, because it's kind of more hassle than it's worth, because if it has any problems, it can change what you're playing. If it's just closed, it feels more like a regular saxophone or a more modern saxophone. So yeah, it has a little bit different design. It's got one of these holes on this side of the bell, one on the other side, so it looks a little bit different. Sometimes both of them, I think on most modern saxophones, there are two that are right here. On some older saxophones, there are two right here. This one has one on each side for whatever reason. They decided to do that. So there are a few variations. In terms of playing the vintage saxophones, it's kind of like when you're playing notes, you're trying to like hit a target. And you probably have noticed that certain notes are harder to play than others on any saxophone, especially if you're a beginner. But on some of the older horns, it's just like you're trying to get a smaller target to hit certain notes. And if you develop the skill, if you're kind of used to the saxophone, you can get used to it. But it does make it more difficult to play. I would say a more modern saxophone tends to play in tune easier, and it tends to be easier to play. You can play these in tune, and you might be thinking, why would you even want to play one of these old saxophones if there's problems and it's difficult to play? There's trade-offs. So basically, I really like the tone of this saxophone. It is harder to play, but I think the tone that I get from it is worth it for me. I really like the tone of this saxophone. So this is the main saxophone that I play. So it's a little bit harder to play, but I like the tone on it. So that's kind of the trade-off for me. And it's kind of your preference, what you want to play. I had to kind of switch my mouthpiece to get something that worked with the saxophone. You have to kind of combine the different equipment to get a combination that works for you. And it works for your body too. Your body is half the instrument really, because half of it's here, half of it's here. It's not just the saxophone, it's not just the equipment. A lot of it's up to you how you're going to sound. Let me know if you have questions about vintage saxophones, because I have played a few of them before. I have played the new saxophones. You can check out my videos at NAMM and see what I kind of think about those. And you can ask about something like this if you want to. I would maybe say, if you've been playing saxophone for a little while, you might want to try out a vintage horn, see what you think of it, see if it's something you can handle playing. If you like the tone of it, maybe you like a different tone better. It's kind of up to you. If you haven't played before, you may not want to start with a vintage horn just because it is a little bit harder to get it going. I I guess people used to do that back in the day, and it just was a little bit harder, but it's going to be maybe a little bit less frustration if you start playing with a modern saxophone. But again, it's your call. I just maybe keep that in mind if you're checking out saxophones to get. Sometimes you can get a vintage horn for quite a bit less money than a modern horn. And it might be something you want to do, it might not be something you want to do. It kind of depends on what you're feeling up to, if you're ready to kind of handle the difficulties that are associated with the vintage horns, and if you like the tone of the vintage horns. So think about that.